FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt. It's being spread by a lot of people and it really annoys me. So when the FUD's being spread, who are you going to call?
FUD Busters.
The first FUD I want to bust is cost. Oh, they're too expensive. They cost more to run. Okay, so the first part, yeah, look, they do cost a little bit more, but if you go back 10 or 11 years, the cost of a battery was running at around $1,200 US per kilowatt hour. So, a 50 kilowatt hour battery would have cost $60,000 US. With all the advances that have been made, that's down to around about $130 US per kilowatt hour. So that's almost a tenth the price. So they've dropped dramatically and they're still dropping. It is estimated that once they get below 100, closer to $80 per kilowatt hour, the price of an EV will be on a parity with the equivalent internal combustion engine, or ICE. So yeah, they do cost more. As you'll see, the total cost of ownership, you're better off with an EV, even an expensive one. After about 3 years of ownership, a standard range Tesla Model 3, which costs $66,000 odd to buy now, actually works out to be many thousands of dollars cheaper to have owned than the equivalent, say, Toyota Camry, at about half the price. A friend of mine, Pete Petrovsky, did a study on the cost of owning a Tesla Model 3 with the equivalent ICE car at half the price. And he made some assumptions that are perfectly legitimate as to the cost of electricity, the cost of petrol, the cost of insurance. And he worked out that a Tesla Model 3, after 3 years of ownership, you were $14,000 Australian better off to have owned the Tesla than the Camry. You see, the thing is, the electric vehicle depreciates way less than the equivalent ICE vehicle. So at the moment, though, with Teslas and most EVs in Australia, you're selling them second hand for more than new because of the supply and demand. We've got a 9-month wait for a Tesla Model 3. So people are selling their second-hand Teslas, and dealerships are selling second-hand Teslas in Australia for far more than they actually cost brand new. So even if we allow for a 10% depreciation on the Tesla, which was from a study from America where they've been around for a lot longer, and you look at the cost of the fuel, the service and maintenance, which by the way on a Tesla is zero. If you actually follow their guidelines, it costs about $111 over 3 years. And then the registration CTP, the insurance. Now, the insurance of the Tesla is slightly more than the equivalent Camry. So at the end of the day, after 3 years, you're almost $14,000 a year better off with the Tesla. Now, having said that, if you have to borrow the money, then that obviously eats into it because you have to borrow a bit more. But even allowing for that, you're still better off. So if you had to borrow 100% of either car, you're still around $12,000 a year better off with the Tesla than the average Australian ICE vehicle. But 12,000, 14,000, it doesn't really matter. You're better off at the end of the day. Yes, there is a slight upfront capital expenditure, but your running costs are a lot less. That's based on actually paying for every kilowatt hour that you put into your battery. Most people charge at home. 95% of electric vehicle owners will charge their car at home. You can charge them off your solar panels, which is what I do. There's no cost. It's free electricity. So it's free petrol, if you like. You don't get that with an ICE car. And even if you had to pay for the electricity, you're still better off. I have done 57,000 kilometers in my Model 3, and it's hardly cost me a cent. I started off charging at night, but I then retired. So I charge it during the day. My car's just been out in the garage charging off with solar panels. Free. So it can work out a lot cheaper to own an EV. Now, having said that, there are some more EVs coming out. BYD, for instance, that are bringing out a $45,000 electric vehicle called the Atto 3. And they'll shortly be bringing out an even cheaper one, a small hatchback, the Atto 2, which will be, look, let's say 35,000. It just depends upon inflation and what have you. But that's cheaper than a Camry. Okay, it's a small hatchback, but it's really cheap to run and really cheap to buy. So the cost argument really should just go out the window. There'll be more FUD Busters coming later. But in the meantime, please help the channel by liking, subscribing, making a comment, but it will help other people get to see this. So as I said, there will be more FUD Busters, but I've made them individual little videos so that someone comes to you and goes, oh, the battery will run out in 2 years and you'll need to replace it at $40,000. I'm going to do a video on that. So you'll be able to point them to separate videos. I'll make it into a playlist eventually so that you can point people to FUD Busters. Thanks very much.